Vala, what's that? It's Vala, what's that?
All right, it's now 17:15. Welcome to the last session for this afternoon in this track on programming languages. Just some information first. After this session, there are no more lectures, but there will be lightning talks in the main hall. I have the pleasure of welcoming Zeeshan Ali. Sorry, the Z was dropped there. It's a difficult letter for Swedes. Who is going to tell us what Vala is. So Zeeshan, what is Vala?
I picked this guy. So
Open here.
So, can you hear me, everyone? Good. My name is Zeeshan Ali. My actual last name is there, which is in the brackets because it never got into the documents. That's why I write it in brackets, so people can still differentiate me because there's other Zeeshan Alis in open source as well. People still get us confused. Anyway, I'll talk about Vala. What is it? Well, firstly, it's a character in Stargate, but that's not who I'm talking about today. Although we can talk about that too if you want. I'm an SG-Fun fan. Programming language, it is. That's what I'm talking about. But before I can dwell into what Vala really is, I have to give a brief history lesson. So once upon a time in the GNOME world, everything was written in C, like libraries, plugins, applications, everything was in C. And there was no other programming language being used. And we didn't use C++ well, the decisions to not use C++ was not done when I was there, it was much before I got involved in GNOME. But mainly it was all the developers, the GNOME developers, they had a lot of experience with C++ and they didn't like that experience. There's multiple problems that it's defined so that it you can do things in too many multiple ways. And then there's C++ projects, different C++ projects using totally different ways of doing the same thing. And you have to learn all those things, and you have to be good at all those different ways of doing the exact same thing. And also, it didn't really give us any big advantage. The biggest advantage of a high-level language would be memory management, and C++ doesn't really achieve that. So if we are still having to deal with memory management, so why go for C++? Especially if it comes with a price. Even still, the C++ compilers, they are much slower than the C compilers. There's also something in the design of the language that makes it impossible for them to have the same speed as C. So if there's a... Okay.
No, I mean...
But you are.
I mean his mic on the chart.
Is it?
Yeah, some sound, some buzzing.
Okay.
Can you
Good.
Ajá. Raise your hands as if I was going to be a policeman or something like that.
I won't talk anymore against C++ if that's what you're Hello. Is that good?
Try to move as if you...
Yeah.
Is that good? Anyway, so yeah, I really am going to stop talking about C++ because yeah, I didn't really have much experience in that myself. So, but suffices to say that C++ wasn't used for many reasons, good or bad, you can do it. But still we had a way to do object-oriented programming in C. Not the ideal way because C is not meant for objects, there is no syntax for it. So you have to use a library, you have to use particular macros and stuff, and you have to generate a lot of boilerplate code. And writing an object in C is actually not trivial, it's still not is after all these years. So we had a problem, we needed some language, especially to write applications. And nobody wants to write applications in a low-level language as C. So one of the languages that became very prominent later on was Python. It's a nice language, nice scripting and everything. However, it's really good for apps, and even those apps that are slim, if your code base is very large. So since it's not a strongly typed language, it's very easy to become very hard to maintain. You don't know what the function, what parameters it's receiving, what it's supposed to do with them, what it's returning value and stuff like that. So it's hard to maintain stuff in Python. So it wasn't like the best thing ever. And you couldn't write even large application in it. So not a good fit. Some people said C#. It has the advantage that it was strongly typed. Many good things about it. However, the problem is that it comes with a runtime dependency. You need to have .NET or Mono or some big runtime, and they are like all as big as the operating system. So people don't like that. At least many people don't. Some people are okay with it. So it wasn't really adopted. It was still apps were mainly written in Python, and most other things were in C. Many apps still in C. So that's where Vala came into existence to solve all these problems. That's one thing. It's a language. It's a C#-like language. So the syntax is derived from C#, and that's why it's strongly typed and all the advantages of C#. It was designed and implemented by some guy named Billiter. He's a Swiss guy. Pretty cool guy. He does a lot of work in a very short amount of time. It was targeted mainly for GNOME. It's not tied to GNOME. He made sure of that. He implemented it in a very nice way so that it's not completely tied to GNOME, and you can use it for purposes outside of GNOME. As I said, no runtime because it compiles to C mainly. I'll explain later what else it can compile to, but mainly it's targeted to be compiled to C. So you can think it in terms of you're writing C code, but not in C, but in another language which is high level, and it makes the experience much more pleasant than C would. It's object-oriented because we needed to write G-objects. Everyone wants to do object-oriented programming nowadays. It has all the bindings for all the GNOME APIs. These are some of the main ones I could think of from the back of my head, but there's many other too that come with it, with Vala. But there's some other libraries that provide it themselves, like Vala doesn't bundle it, but they provided the libraries. There's platform bindings, so if you want to do some programming related to POSIX or Linux specific APIs, you can do it with Vala. Apart from the main features, there's some cool features as well in the language. Generics, so it's especially very cool for implementing collections. So you want data structure for list, data structure or class mainly for hash tables and those kind of collections. So you want it so that it's generic. You can put any kind of object in those in the list or in the hash table. But at the same time, when you declare them, you are able to say that I want a hash table for these exact types. So when you remove things from it, compiler will know that, oh, you're adding some integer into it, although you said you will add only strings into it. So the compiler checks are still there, and at the same time you have the data structure is a generic one. So you get both things at the same time. This is one of my most favorite things about the language. It's you have a special syntax for doing asynchronous programming. If you do asynchronous programming in languages which doesn't have support for it, so you would see that you pass a method or a function to the async call, and when it's done doing its async work, it will call that function. So you have to declare that function somewhere else, and then be able to cope with the data you passed with it previously. So it's you have to define multiple functions, and if you have multiple asynchronous calls, so you will have like multiple functions. So it's very easy in C to make really complicated code if you just want it to be asynchronous. And if you want to write UIs, that's what you want to do. You want to have it as asynchronous as possible. So I'll show the code later and you will know what I'm talking about. Memory management, as I said about the C++ thing, that it doesn't offer that, but Vala does. What it does is that when it generates C code, it inserts unref, like it uses reference counting, just like GObjects does. So it put the unref calls for you, and the object, when it's not needed, is automatically unwrapped for you in time. So you don't have to worry about it as an application program. It has integrated dbus support. So I'll show you that too. So combined with the asynchronous syntax, it's so cool. Writing dbus code in Vala is just amazing. Like you feel really good about it. And but if you write it in C, it's just annoying. So when you want to do any dbus code, that would be one reason to use Vala. Its front end is modular. What that means is that the syntax, as I said, it's C# based, but that's the default syntax. But you can have another front end on top of it, because the main Vala, the implementation, it's created as a library. So you can use it in your application. It's, for example, a compiler application, which has totally different syntax, but it can use that library to generate the C code, or whatever the backend is, which is the second thing that you. Okay, I forgot to update the title. It's supposed to say modular backend. What that means is that by default it generates C, as I said, but you can make it generate another language. And there has been some prototypes just to demonstrate. There is a front end for a language called Genie, which is more Python-like, but with data types and stuff. And it just uses Vala in background and compiles to C. The example backend that exists is PHP. Not the best language on the planet, but that's what York chose to demonstrate is what he wanted. And last but not least, Vala is awesome in general. So let's see some code. All right, you can see that? So as you can see, just like any other object-oriented programming language, you define a class, you tell what it derives from. This is GObject deriving class. You just have one method in it, public method. In the main function, you just create an instance of that class, call its method, return. So that's the basic. Do I need to explain anything?
Zeeshan,
Yeah.
we're missing the first character in the chance. There are any
Oh,
times
no.
you can, it's our fault, not yours, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But if you could resize the window.
Does it help?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that was the basic one. Let's run it. Let's see first server. So that's all you need to do to create a server object. Can you see how easy it is? You just need to use these annotations that tell Vala that this is a dbus object and what's the name for it, what's the it's just like a normal class, just like normal. That's a private thing, so it won't be exported. But if it was public, that it will be exported on the dbus, on the bus. And then you have a similar function there. And from main, you say that I want to own a name on the bus, which is org.example of demo for our sake. And the function to call when the bus name is successfully acquired. And once it's acquired, you just use the connection that is passed to register your server object. And that's all it takes. You have a simple service already. But if you look at it, the actual server object, it's so small, it's so easy. I'll go straight. Oh, let's just see a synchronous one. So you define the interface just like you in the server class. You define the class in the object. You can just define the interface. So as long as Vala knows what interface to use, and you just create an object of the type using this method from dbus bindings, and you synchronously created an object for that server that you just created, and you call the method on that server then just like you would call a method on normal class, and that's it. It's so simple. And if you want to do it async, so similar. It's very similar. It's just that you need asynchronous method. You can yield on asynchronous methods, which means just stop processing code in this place until this asynchronous function returns. So that you can put this word yield in front of all asynchronous methods as long as you are in the asynchronous method. If you are not, then you have to use this syntax, which is begin, because you are not in an asynchronous context, so you cannot just fall asleep. This is synchronous context. So you just tell Vala that launch this asynchronous call in a separate thread or whatever, and I don't want to care about when it returns or what it doesn't return. And you just run the main loop, and it's a event loop available from glib library, and then this function ping server will run in that asynchronously in that loop, and then it can yield on any asynchronous calls. And so if this was C code, then you can't do this yielding. You'll have to pass a function to this get proxy first, and then get callback into that function, and from there you will again have to do this demo.ping and pass a callback, and then again a callback will be called. So there will be multiple functions. Let's see them working. Because, what's happening? Yeah. It's sending you how many times it has been called. Okay, this really wants to work. There are some other calls too, but I'll just quickly show you. So signals, if you want to signal another object from a method of the class, you just call the signal as if it's a normal method, and that signal is then called. And from the using code, we just say the object name dot the name of the signal dot connect, and then you give it a callback. One thing I didn't mention, which is cool in Vala, is support for lambda functions. So you can define functions inline, and so if you want to give a callback to a function you want to pass a callback, you can define it inline right here. You have closures, so you can use local variables in the lambdas. So that's a really cool thing. All right. So do you want to see more code? There is some resistance to Vala. How much time is left?
Oh, there's 10 time.
Cool. Some in the GNOME world, unfortunately, but also maybe outside GNOME. I don't know much about the outside world. And people have some complaints. One of them is it's not a proper language. And when you ask people why you think that, they will say, oh, there's no book about it. Nobody published a book. So I don't think that's a definition of a proper language, that whether it has a book or not. If I can make a really, really crappy language, which is not really a cool language, or even a proper one, and write a book about it, doesn't matter. So I think that argument should be totally ignored. It's stupid. Well, there is some point to it that there's supposed to be documentation, but we have documentation. It's online, available. I think it's also available in PDF formats, so it's not bad at all. One of them is generated code is ugly, the C code. That's true. However, why are we looking at it? Because Vala can compile it completely to you. Like if you want to compile it to object code and stuff, it will do it for you. But if you want, you just generate a C code and then you can tell GCC to compile it to binary. But you're not really supposed to look at it. So if you are looking at it, you're some advanced guy who knows how Vala works, and if you do, then you shouldn't be complaining about the code, but rather you should improve its readability if you can. There's no point in complaining if you're an advanced Vala hacker. Is it? So yeah, I think that's also that. One aspect of it that is true is the generated code has it gives you compiler warnings like from GCC. The thing is that Vala knows what it's doing, so the warning from compiler is most often bogus. It will tell you that, oh, you are passing a value that is not the same type as it was declared. But Vala knows that it's like inherited type or something like that, so it can be passed in as that type, and it doesn't need to be casted. But I think it would be better if Vala did the casting, it dropped the casting there so the compiler doesn't complain about it. But this is also something that is that's not so important, but if you think it is, it's open source. You can go and fix like these small things in Vala. This is these like small things, so I think it can be fixed if it's a problem for you. Yeah, this is the biggest thing people complain about. This is unstable. I'll tell you my story with the language, so you will understand why I think it's not really true. It used to be unstable 7 years ago. Like when it started, it was extremely unstable. Like there were things changing in the language itself. What's with this thing?
Try to move a little bit to the left.
This is pretty unstable.
Listen, move a little bit to the left.
That's right, actually. No.
I say he picks the other one. Probably the batteries are dying.
Yeah. Try changing the element.
No, it's okay. It doesn't take long. Hello. Hello. I don't have the thing. Sorry about this. At least you're not getting bored watching me suffer. How do you do that? Yep.
Can you hear?
Hello? No, I have muted it. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hello? I'll just shout. Hello?
Have you turned the microphone on?
Hello?
Yeah.
It's on, yeah?
We hear you fine without the microphone.
Okay. Okay, never mind then. It's okay. Never mind.
Maybe.
So what I was saying was that. So, yeah, what was I saying? Unstable, yeah. So, it was unstable. It has been getting better and better and better every year. And for the last 4 years, whenever something breaks, it's usually the bindings. And they break because there are like so many bindings, so there are so many functions of all the libraries that have been binded, that of course nobody has checked that if all of them are correctly binded. So when someone uses some function that has never been used in Vala code before, they realize, oh, this is not correct. It has to be correctly binded. So then they have to fix that, and sometimes it has to be fixed in a way that is not backward compatible. So in that way, yeah, it is not stable. But it rarely, even that is happening very rarely nowadays, because more and more people are using it, and more of the functions are getting tested on the APIs. What are you doing, guys? And also, there is something about the ABI that is generated, the C ABI, or ABI. So for libraries, that's a problem, because if you wrote a library yesterday and tomorrow your ABI changed, then the application that was using that library cannot use the library anymore, it cannot link to it. So that's important. And there is some point to that. In the Vala project doesn't yet guarantee ABI. ABI, it doesn't guarantee that it will be remaining fixed. But they haven't had any breakage for a while. And they tried their level best that it doesn't happen. They go extra mile for that it doesn't happen. So it's not really a big point, and but some people say this. So I don't know. It's up to you. In my experience, it hasn't been a big problem. But although I haven't written a library in Vala, so maybe that's the reason. So resistance, as we know, is futile. I'm speaking from my personal experience. I wrote a project called Rigel. It's a DLNA UPnP media server. What that means is a program that allows you to share your media to other computers from your computer or whatever you're running Rigel on. I did it for Nokia, so it was targeted for not just for desktop but also for embedded systems. So that also shows that Vala can be used to write code that is very efficient. There's actually some metrics about it, like you did some study how does it compare with code written in C or in C++. It compares pretty well. So yeah, so the reason I chose Vala was not that I wanted to write a new cool application in Vala, but Rigel wasn't meant to be like a big thing. It was meant to be just a demo application for a library I've been working on called GUPnP. It's a C G-object-based library, and I decided that okay, we have Vala bindings, so that would be a way to test these bindings as well. So I first wrote this media server in C, which was about 2,500 lines of code. And then I ported it to Vala, which became 1,000 lines of code. So in that respect, at least, it was very impressive to me that, wow, I can do the same thing in less code, much less code now. And I became very efficient at writing like this application. I did a lot of progress in it very fast because I was writing in a higher level language that allowed me to do a lot more in a lot less time and cared less about things. And in those days, there was a lot of bindings problems. So despite that, it still helped me a lot. And nowadays, since those problems are very few and happen rarely, it's even more pleasant nowadays. After that, I worked, when I joined Red Hat, I was assigned to work on a project called Boxes. I have a lightning talk later about it. It's a virtual machine manager mainly. I didn't write the first version, but there was a team of 3 people, and me and this other guy, Mark Andre, he was a fan of Vala as well. And we were both saying that we should write this in Vala. But there was one guy in the team who said, no, and you can't write it in Vala for various reasons. And but what happened was that this guy went on a weekend, and he used his weekend to write a prototype of the project already. So since it was there already, he said, okay, it's there now. So you didn't write it. The one who wrote it decided to do it in Vala. Let's do it. So then it went in Vala. And because in the end, it depends on who is doing the work. So if I'm doing the work, I'm making the decisions. So if you don't like it, you can do your own thing, right? I've been working on this for more than 3 years now. Being very nice doing it in Vala. I really love that it's in Vala. So because I can do, as I said, so much more in so little time. And I think the experience with Boxes was a lot more pleasant with Vala than it was with Rigel, because as I said, it's been improving with time. There are some other success stories too. I'm not going to tell all of them, and I don't even know from the back of my head. But one of them is Yorba. It's a company in San Francisco that very nice guys. They have a non-profit organization, and they want to just write nice GNOME applications that are useful to people. And they have been meaning to. They were looking forward to a language that was just like Vala. They had the idea that a language should be like this, but there was no implementation, and I guess they didn't want to write their own either. So when Vala came along, they were really happy with it, and they decided to write these applications. Actually, they first decided that whatever applications they will write, they will be in Vala. And then they decided what is needed for GNOME by people. First, one of the first was the email client, photo editor. And so they wrote this called Shotwell. And recently they have been working on a new application, email client called Gary, and that's also in Vala. As I said, everything they do is in Vala. So that's one. And then there's some new cool people called Elementary OS. It's the distribution, apparently. And they also are writing as much code in Vala as they can. They love the project. And there's all these applications. There's just 4 of them. I think they have more. They have more than that. First one is a library. Actually, it's based on GTK. So they're extending GTK to fit their particular distribution, particular display system. So yeah, you can use that as a library. Then the others are applications, editing application, and email client, I think, or the browser. Yeah. I forgot what each of them is. Slingshot is an application launcher. Yeah, that's all I have. So thanks for listening, and how much time do I have for questions?
You have 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, so, there's a question.
How about the tool support? Is there a decent IDE support?
No. So if you are a person who needs that, so you're not in luck. But many of us don't use IDEs. So at least I don't. So I just use Vim and command. So.
Is there a visual debugger?
No, I don't think so. GDB, yeah. So there there's an option to enable debugging symbols, Vala debugging symbols in the object file, and you can debug it with using GDB. So you get the Vala context, like which Vala file, which line is this around, and then from there you can find out. So at least there's GDB support.
So the visual GDB.
I have no idea about that. I've never used it, so maybe there's. You ask on Vala the channel, on IRC channel, and they can tell you. Someone would know in there. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have lots of questions.
Really? So go ahead.
But I think the man in green.
Really is good.
What about the object introspection?
Yeah, it's supported. But the thing is, there's always. G-object introspection doesn't have everything that Vala needs. So you don't get good, nice APIs if you use the G-object introspection alone. So what the idea is that the Vala API be created from G-object introspection. So some of the libraries that I'm using in boxes, so they provide their own WebPs. And I think almost any library that provides its own Vala API, they are generating it from G-object introspection. And usually it's more or less just generated. Like there's one command line in the make file that generates it. But sometimes we need some tweaking, so customization. And there's you can drop a custom file or something like that, and you can tell it like, oh, this parameter is supposed to be an output parameter or something. Something that is not, things that are not supported in G-object introspection. For example, named constructors. So they are not, I think, supported in G-object introspection, but they are in Vala, and they are nice to use. So you say new class name dot with file with this, that kind of constructor. So they are really nice to use, and it would be nice to have them in G-object introspection, but they don't want it in there. So as long as that's true, that there's things that are in Vala and people want it in Vala, and they're not in G-object introspection, we have to generate the WebP. But if that's not true anymore in a good future someday, then we can drop the WebP altogether and just go for GA directly.
What about vice versa, like using Vala libraries from?
Oh, the Vala can generate G-object introspection for you nicely. It's a really blessing in there. That's one of the advantages of Vala actually. That when you do it in C, you have to create these documentations and like describe the annotations and stuff. But in Vala, you don't have to do anything. It can just generate it for you from the code.
I believe Jens was first, and then you.
Well, memory safety. Can you Vala program die with the sync fault?
Theoretically, yes, but practically it usually doesn't happen. If it does happen, it's usually a problem in binding, and very rarely maybe in the compiler it does something wrong. But that's getting very rare in compiler. But the binding one is a bit more.
Did you do something strange with your references in Vala?
Yeah, like when you write a binding, right, you tell like what's the memory management, who is passed, is it the ownership that is being passed, it's not passed. So if you say that ownership is passed and it's not, so then you double free the object. And yeah, so that can happen, crash can happen, but it's very rare. It's much more rare than C. So you are more likely to forget to do right memory management, and it is for Vala to do it wrong.
And if you use a null pointer, do you program just dies? So can you catch an exception, null pointer exception?
There's some guards for it. It's not foolproof, no, but there's some guards for it. Like for example, if you pass null to a parameter that's not declared as nullable, the compiler will warn or even error out that you're passing it wrong type. But yeah, those help a lot already. So I haven't had a single problem with dereferencing a null pointer because of these guards.
Is it possible that you sometimes construct a value in memory?
Yeah, it happens. It does happen.
So
but as I said, there is some guard possibility. Jens, oh sorry, last time.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was wondering, does Vala compile across like other platforms? Like
Yeah, it's yeah, it's no problem.
and you say these, for example,
Well, I think unfortunately not what was the name? Forgot the name. Yoruba guys. They didn't. I think they don't do much of that.
oh, okay.
But I think the elementary OS people are doing it, as far as I know. I'm not sure. But there are people working on it, so it's not like.
Okay, have you spoken to the guy from Nova? Like, what
From
they thought
where?
about the language? Like the people from Nova?
Yeah, I have spoken to them many times. Nice people.
Any more questions for Zeeshan?
You're comparing like a lot with C. I'm just wondering what are the advantages over Java?
Over C?
Over Java.
Over Java.
You could.
Well, it's the same thing, right? It's C# runtime. With Java, you have a runtime dependency to Java, JVM, whatever it's called. So yeah, that's the disadvantage there. And in Vala, it's not there. It can be compiled to native code.
So you can compile in Java as well.
Well, I don't know. Nowadays, right? Is it? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think Java was really ever seriously considered for GNOME for some reason. I don't know nowadays, but at least 10 years ago it was really, really slow with Java. That was my experience with it at least. I was really into it at some point, but I found it extremely slow at some time. Yeah, so.
There was another question from Jens, I think.
Sorry. One thing that would be an advantage would be the GNOME libraries and stuff. So if you want to use the platform libraries of GNOME, so there's no bindings, nice bindings for Java. There is some, but they're not so nice, and they at least don't use this modern G-object introspection stuff. So I don't think they're very good. So that would be one advantage too. Yeah, someone else? You were saying?
It's when you write the Vala program, can you forget about C APIs and this?
Yeah, you could do that.
Do you have to be aware of this to like?
Well, it depends how far do you go with it. But I know of a person who does Vala coding, and he's really not at C coding. So he was okay with it. He was not complaining.
Do you sometimes have to use the C link given the C?
No. I haven't used it in boxes at all. Like there's no C code whatsoever. So no.
So maybe a quick question if anyone has one? No? Alright, so before I close this session, or we close this session, let me remind you that in a quarter of an hour you have the opportunity, or quarter of an hour and some more minutes probably, of hearing Zeeshan again at the Lightning Talk session. There is another Lightning Talk session tomorrow as well. If you're still up for more fun after that, we have no less than 4 workshops running at 7 o'clock. They're automotive grade Android, advanced GNU parallel, platform and language independent framework for speech recognition, and Mandos, disk encryption without passwords. So if anything of that's of any interest, please have a look at the schedule and go there and learn something fun. So let's thank the speaker. And thank you all for coming. Hope you'll enjoy the evening.